When it comes to the O&C lands in southwest Oregon, virtually everybody says the status quo is not acceptable. The governor has stated that we need to produce more revenues, more timber off these lands. Senator Wyden agrees, we need to produce more timber, more revenues. There are a few outliers, people who are happy with the status quo with 20% plus unemployment in rural areas, the last mill closing in Josephine County, counties that can't even afford to put out sheriff's road patrols anymore. But even among environmental groups, those whose objective is just forest health, they should agree that something needs to be done. Much of this land is currently unprotected. A recent court decision in Washington, D.C. has mandated that the Bureau of Land Management increase harvests dramatically on these lands. And there's a second case pending before the same judge, which would almost take the harvest on those lands back up to the bad old days, to 1986, when under my predecessor, they harvested 1.683 billion board feet from those lands. That was not sustainable. I ran against that, and I said we need to protect the old growth. Well, this bill protects the old growth. It takes and sets aside 1.2 million acres of old growth. It sets aside 300,000 acres in riparian preserves. It sets aside almost 90,000 acres of new wilderness, 120 miles of wild and scenic rivers. Those are important to our long-term values, to our heritage, to our kids and our grandkids. And it takes the remaining lands, less than half, and divides those half to be managed with the harvest widely dispersed on more than a 100-year basis, and the other half to be managed on a shorter rotation. Now, some have said this is destroying the land, et cetera, et cetera. It isn't. It's responsible forestry in the greatest timber growing part of the United States of America. But the other part of this that is absolutely critical is this legislation will raise nearly $1 billion over 10 years for counties in southwest Oregon. Counties, some of which today are considering bankruptcy, insolvency, a number of which can barely afford to keep their jails open. They've already let out many prisoners before their sentence time. They don't have rural sheriff's patrols. They're having to neglect their roads and bridges and highways, and public health and other programs are being eliminated. The status quo is not acceptable. Whether you just care about the forests and our heritage, or if you care about people who live in rural Oregon and a productive economy, the status quo will not work. We must do something. What we did today in the House is a beginning. It's not the final product. I know that. I didn't support the legislation in which it was contained, and I didn't support all the aspects of the bill I helped co-author with Greg Walden and Kurt Schrader. We know it'll change in the Senate, but the critical first step was sending a bill to Senator Wyden so he can begin the process there, so ultimately the two houses can come together, forge a compromise that can get signed by the president, and bring some certainty and predictability for these forests, these counties, and all of southwest Oregon's residents. It's a good first step.